Can you hear me now? Okay, what the fuck? I was saying, welcome in, everyone. Concentrating Mind, I love you so much. Thank you for the raid. Welcome in, everyone. Sorry, I was going to the bathroom, getting ready and stuff. Holy shit. I can't believe you guys all waited. Thank you so much. Store meeting. I didn't realize you had a meeting. That's fucking crazy. But yeah, no, I did see that you're releasing the new store tonight, like a new website. That's fucking sick. So are you making it or are you having it made? I don't even know if you're still here. You might be off relaxing. That's cool. So holy shit. Okay, wow. We like to start things off here with a segment called This is America, where I watch some news, try and get informed, and just kind of offer my opinion on things. If it's not your thing, don't worry. It doesn't last very long. It only lasts about 30 minutes or so, and then I go straight into games. So we will be playing some games today. I'm not sure what we'll be playing. I have a couple ideas floating around the old noggin, but we'll see where we land. So without further ado, I am going to pause the music. I feel so bad for making you all wait. Thank you guys all so much for waiting. Oh my god. Let's jump into This is America.
Let's talk about Israel, because the biggest news of the week has obviously been this.
This morning, the worst violence in years between Israelis and Palestinians is intensifying. Israel's military attacked new targets in Gaza, the Palestinian territory where militants are firing hundreds of rockets into Israel. And in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, Palestinian protesters fought with police.
Since Monday, over 80 Palestinians have been killed and 7 Israelis in this tit-for-tat war.
Okay, there is a lot to unpack there, from the horror of the situation, which has escalated significantly since then, to the use of the phrase tit-for-tat war in a conflict where you just pointed out one side has suffered over 10 times the casualties.
No
Something
shit.
which speaks to both the severe power imbalance at play here and how that often gets obscured by how we choose to talk about it. And look,
America is extremely guilty of like absolutely demonizing all of Palestine and Muslims in general and supporting Israel blindly. I mean, I believe we helped stand them up originally. I mean, Israel was created after World War II. It's a whole complicated thing. For Jewish refugees, because the world was so anti-Semitic, there was nowhere else for them to go. No other country was willing to take in Jewish refugees after World War II because the whole world was anti-Semitic, just not as anti-Semitic as Germany, more or less. But there was a lot of mistrust and negative propaganda around Jewish people at the time. So, like, this definitely... Palestine is under attack. Muslims are under attack. The religion of Islam is under attack over there. And they're being persecuted. They're being singled out. And they're being discriminated against. And for some reason, we have so many people over here blindly supporting Israel.
If you are not fluent in Middle East history, I know this can seem overwhelming. The latest chapter in a long story you haven't read. So I'm not going to try and recap the history here, or indeed propose a solution, although interestingly, I do have one, because someone with this accent always thinks they can fix things in the Middle East. I redrew the map a bit, and I have a lot of misplaced confidence that it would work very well. But this week's actually been a pretty good reminder that while some things are incredibly complex and require a great deal of context, others are just wrong.
Yeah.
For instance, one of the incidents that's been a flashpoint, the planned expulsion of Palestinians who've lived in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood for generations. It's currently tied up in the Israeli court system with the foreign...
They were literally given these homes decades and decades ago. They have lived here for generations, and now all of a sudden Israel's decided, nope, we want this land, we want these buildings back, get out. It's absolutely disgusting. In no way is it right, in no way is it moral. And this is what I mean by for some reason, some people are blindly supporting Israel. One side is being singled out. One side is being bullied. One side is being, like, literally just cornered. Like, just absolutely it's fucking awful. And for people to be like, you know, the people of Palestine are the problem, the people of Palestine are the bullies or the instigators. It's absolute horseshit. Shows they know nothing about what's actually going on currently or in general. And shows a little of their like anti-Muslim, honestly. Like, it's just like you are not looking into the situation at all. Like, you're hearing Muslim, you're thinking of everything America's told you to associate with Muslims, and you're assuming they're in the wrong. That is such a ridiculous viewpoint. It's such a ludicrous argument that somehow has just got more and more traction over the years. And so many people are walking around with this preconceived notion that, like, Muslims can only do wrong, to the point where they'll blindly support awful shit like this. You know? That's what's truly disgusting. Like, it's gotten to a point where this is evil. This is evil happening right in front of all of us. And there's so many of us that are watching this evil and saying, like, at least someone's doing it. That's fucking disgusting.
Ministry calling it a real estate dispute. But it's worth knowing that the UN's Commissioner for Human Rights has said that these expulsions would violate Israel's obligations under international law. So it is not hard to see why sanitized terms like evictions or property disputes rankle those who live there.
You grew up in the neighborhood, your family home is slated for eviction. What is the scene right now?
Well, I thank you so much for having me. To start, it's not really an eviction. It's forced ethnic displacement, to be accurate. Eviction does not imply the hundreds and hundreds of heavily armed police and army and settlers polluting, blowing up your doors, throwing your children from your windows, and using brute force to throw you out in the street and assaulting and arrest you should you resist. It doesn't imply the grenades. It doesn't imply the rubber-coated bullets.
Right. The threat of eviction is accurate only in a very superficial level, in that one day you live somewhere, the next day you don't, and that change wasn't your choice. But
That's
it doesn't
so
tell the
evil.
whole story. It's like running a headline that says, Matt Gaetz reaches out to Florida youth. Sure, not inaccurate, but it's missing some pretty crucial details about the exact nature of that interaction. And look, it is true that militants from Palestinian groups like Hamas fired over 1,000 rockets towards Israel this week, and that is reprehensible. But, and I realise this is the most load-bearing conjunction in history, but the majority of those rockets thankfully didn't reach their target for a very clear reason.
The casualties and the damage would have been greater, but for Israeli interceptor rockets, the so-called Iron Dome, which blew most of the incoming missiles to pieces.
Which I'm pretty sure we helped stand up for them.
A so-called Iron Dome, and I know, what if we blew up the rockets with more rockets? Sounds like something someone drunkenly wrote down on a napkin once, but it is a real military defense system that really works. And I also know not all the rockets were shot down. Israeli civilians were killed this week, which is terrible. But the point is, this isn't tit for tat. There is a massive imbalance when it comes to the two sides' weaponry and capabilities. While most of the rockets aimed toward Israeli citizens this week were intercepted, Israel's airstrikes were not. They hit their targets, including a house in a refugee camp, a building housing the Associated Press and Al Jazeera, and this 13-story office and apartment building. And while Israel insisted that there were military targets in that building and that they destroyed it as humanely as possible, even warning people to evacuate beforehand, for the record, destroying a civilian residence sure seems like a war crime, regardless of whether you send a courtesy heads-up text. And when dozens of people have seen their homes or livelihoods destroyed, it doesn't really help that the Israeli military posted this triumphant meme showing the explosion and the rubble labeled before and after. Look what we did. People lived there before, and now they can't. You get it, right? And obviously, in general, you should probably never meme a war crime.
I am absolutely floored. What is up, GJ Samps09? Sorry, I'm like absolutely fucking floored right now at the idea that the Israeli military created a meme out of their bombing target. The utter disregard for human life, especially given the target was a residential area. And yeah, a war crime. Holy shit, dude. Who wants to side with that?
But if you absolutely have to, at least go with something less boring than the before-after template. Maybe use the Drake meme or the disaster girl. There's a building coming down, so checkmark already there. And it's a little girl with eyes that scream, I don't know what the Geneva Conventions are.
I love John Oliver
The more I
too.
think about it, it works perfectly. The fact is, the citizens of Gaza don't have an Iron Dome to protect them the way that the citizens of Israel do.
Yeah,
it's one
Gaza
of the
got
many
hit
ways they're at a
80, 90
significant
times.
disadvantage. Although an Israeli military
80, 90 people
spokesperson
died.
tried to push back on the idea that there's really much of a discrepancy there.
Somebody on Twitter said that the Palestinians don't have an Iron Dome. I say yes, they have an Iron Dome. It's called Don't Fire Rockets at Israeli Civilians, and we won't fire anything at Gaza.
Yeah, but there are a couple of differences.
The fuck, dude?
Iron Dome, for one, sounds much cooler. And also, it has the significant advantage of being an actual defense system that exists, unlike Gaza's, which is mostly try not to be where the bombs are landing. And it's important to note here, the vast majority of the Palestinians in Gaza are not part of Hamas. They don't get together and all decide to launch rockets. It's not
No
a
shit.
fucking co-op board. But when Israel fires rockets at Gaza, it endangers all Palestinians there. Maybe somebody on Twitter could point that out to that guy. To people in Gaza, it can seem like the only time anyone pays attention to what's happening there is when Hamas is firing rockets, which is understandably very frustrating because they've been living under a suffocating blockade for 14 years. And in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories,
And they don't even have
Palestinians
electricity. They
are
don't even
essentially being
have. They don't even
governed by
have.
a form of
In Gaza, they don't even have electricity most hours of the day. They don't have running water most hours of the day. They like. It's fucking ridiculous what these people have been subjected to for so long, and like now being bombed on top of not allowed to have like certain goods, not even getting the electricity and water you fucking need to live for over a decade at least. Like, oh my god. It is ridiculous to me. Like, it is similar to the argument that people make about like there's absolutely fucking nothing you can say to me that will ever justify putting children in cages at ICE facilities, or even their parents, or separating them. Absolutely not a single fucking thing you could ever say to me to justify that. It's wrong, it's evil, it's unnecessary, and it's just disgusting. This is the same principle. The people in Gaza are just fucking being beaten over and over again, and now they're launching bombs on them, and everyone's like, that's what they fucking get. What? There's nothing you can say to justify this. It is absolutely evil. It is disgusting. It is unnecessary, and it is repulsive. A top-tier military versus a nation that doesn't have water or electricity. What the fuck? What is that? Exactly. It's a fucking... It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. And the only thing that's so frustrating to me is how many people are blindly standing with Israel. And I say blindly because I've been seeing lots of people on social media, my personal social media, of course, standing with Israel. But I know and I can tell by either what they're saying, what they're sharing, or like the general post, they haven't looked into things or aren't aware of the situation. Or at least I genuinely hope that's the case. Because if they are... How? How do you look at that and say, I like that? I just don't fucking get people sometimes, dude.
Apartheid, an assessment echoed by both international and Israeli human rights groups. Life in Gaza
I don't know, but they
is
do.
hard,
I
even
mean,
when
like,
they are not...
we're seeing a lot of Jewish Americans support Israel, and that's a complicated situation because they're gonna default there as usual because that's kind of where their loyalty lies, where their home country is. And you know, you think we've received propaganda of how bad Palestine is. Just imagine if you were in a Jewish community, what it would be like. The propaganda would be even more so. And we also see a surprising amount of government officials standing for Israel. Well, I say surprising because I would hope that they'd be decent, but I guess it's not surprising because they never are. And the U.S. government has a long history of being allies with Israel, working with Israel, helping Israel, standing up Israel, and setting up a lot of their things. So, you know, I'm pretty sure we worked with Israel to deploy the first worm and Stuxnet into the Iranian nuclear facilities back in like the 80s, 90s. If I'm not mistaken, we worked with the Israeli government to develop that process, or develop that worm, and also come up with the deploying method and monitor things. It was a whole thing.
Being bombed, and the US government has implicitly co-signed on the brutally hard line Israel's been taking. This guy basically gave Israel a green light to do anything it wanted for the last 4 years, and while Biden has had the opportunity to reset that relationship, his administration's response this week has been deeply underwhelming, giving a generic statement that Israel has a right to defend itself,
which they're not doing. That's exactly what I'm fucking talking about. Israel has a right to defend itself. Defend itself from what? What the fuck are you talking about? What? From what? The starving people with no water and power who are just trying to live a life? Surrounded by people who treat them like shit? Who don't launch bombs until you kill and level their residential buildings and civilians and fucking refugee camps? Like, you're literally committing war crimes on a desperate area and desperate people, and then like we're over here saying like, well, they have the right to defend themselves. That's ridiculous. Jesus Christ.
That Bush said before him. Israel has a right to defend itself is just something all presidents end up saying out loud at some point in office, like, my fellow Americans, or, what do you mean there are no aliens? This is some bullshit. And look, it's not that Israel doesn't have the right to defend itself, it's just that line cannot be used to excuse absolutely everything. Multiple children have been killed this week, 8 in a single strike just yesterday, and the US is heavily implicated here. Not just by serving as Israel's diplomatic shield at the UN, but by constantly refusing.
Oh, well, you know, the CIA has actually taken some big steps this week. So has the government in general. They confirmed, UFOs a little while back. They have also, in the same CIA disclosed documents, you know what, I'll just pull it up. CIA.gov. Oh, whoops. All right, CIA.gov. Here we are. Resources. Okay. CIA disclosed UFO documents. CIA, UFO, fact or fiction, is this it? I don't know if that's it. UFO documents, National Security Agency. Maybe this is it. German scientists are flying discs. Yeah, okay, so yeah. These are pretty much everything they have. I've heard there were documents released in a minute. Oh yeah, I looked at them right when they happened. Yeah, this was a few years ago, but yeah, this is when they released everything from their information. There was also stuff about astral projection, if I remember right. Astral projection. Soviet. Read the magazine, reading. I know I read it once. CIA astral projection gateway document. Here we go. Your task to provide an assessment of gateway experience in terms of its mechanics and ultimate practicality. As said, I fulfill tasking, spoon it clear. I know this is a fucking tangent, but yeah, here's where they go into details about the use and possibility and details of astral projection, how it's somewhat of an extraterrestrial activity or phenomena, I don't know if it was learned from them or what. I mean, it's hard to say with any of this shit, right? But sure. Oh, okay, they're talking about a wormhole right here. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Right? They've got to be talking about a wormhole, because if you have a black hole in the white hole repels all gravity, black hole sucks in all gravity. What you end up happening is you can get sucked in via the black hole, but once you get too close, the white hole is going to repel you out. Is that what they're talking about? Torus, nucleus, white hole. Nucleus, you're interesting me with that. Galactic north, our galaxy. I'm going to have to read through this again sometime. I mean, who knows what the fuck they're saying? But yeah, that's def a thing.
To criticize the indefensible. Watch as just this week, a State Department spokesman desperately tried to equivocate when asked a pretty simple question.
I want to ask you, Julie, I don't want to harp on this either, but, you know, the Israelis killed 13 people just now, you know, including maybe 5 or 6 children. Do you condemn that? Do you condemn the killing of children?
Saeed,
I'm asking, do you condemn the killing of Palestinian children?
Obviously, and these reports are just emerging, and I understand, I was just speaking to the team, I understand we don't have independent confirmation of facts on the ground yet, so I'm very hesitant to get into reports that are just emerging. Obviously, the deaths of civilians, be they Israeli or Palestinians, are something we would take very seriously.
Holy shit, he just...
Would take seriously, but not stand against? It's a war crime. What the...
Just asked you, is child murder bad? This really isn't hard. Just say yes.
Yeah.
The only scenario in which the answer to is killing children wrong gets tricky is if you're a time traveler in 1890s Austria trying to explain why you just killed the Hitler family's bouncing new baby boy. I know how this looks, but trust me, it is complicated.
It is complicated.
There is a real tendency, particularly in America, to both sides this situation, and I'm not saying that there aren't some areas where that's warranted, but it's important to recognize there are also areas where it's simply not. Both sides are firing rockets, but one side has one of the most advanced militaries in the world. Both sides are suffering heartbreaking casualties, but one side is suffering them exponentially. And it's not like the US is operating from the moral high ground here. It's obviously no stranger to drone-striking weddings and saying, we were just trying to target enemy combatants. This country has blood on its hands too. And look, if you believe Israel's actions are warranted and proportionate this week, you're welcome to try and make that argument.
Yeah.
But we have got to start having this conversation honestly, and falling back on convenient, sanitized terms like real estate disputes and airstrikes on militants feels a little disingenuous when what you're describing is forcing people from the homes they've lived in for decades and killing civilians and children. And again, none of this frees Hamas from responsibility, but Hamas doesn't represent all Palestinians, just as what Israel is doing right now doesn't represent all Israelis or indeed Jewish people. Lots is complicated here, but some things are pretty simple. One side is suffering much more.
Yeah.
If America really wants to help, it might want to seriously consider changing its long-held position here, because for decades, the backbone of America's policy in the Middle East has been that America is an unwavering friend to Israel, which is a great thing to try and be, but at the end of the day, I would hope that a real friend would tell me when I'm being an asshole, and definitely when I'm committing a fucking war crime.
John Oliver for president? He can't be. John Oliver can never be our president because he wasn't born here. He's not a natural U.S. citizen.
You know, big pew-pew sticks that go boom-boom.
Oh, let's get sad now.
Everywhere in America, and I do mean everywhere.
How many guns do you think I can hide underneath a Hawaiian shirt? Of course, we got the gray man. Got my Beretta Model 85. Feels like a Car Arms CT-45. Charter Arms, undercover, 38 Special. Grandpa Dave's old Derringer. This is a Sky CPX-2, Smith & Wesson 442. Oh, wait, one more. North American Arms Sidewinder 22 Magnum, just in case you need something small.
Wow. That is the second most horrifying thing you can find coming at you in a Hawaiian shirt, right after John Lasseter on National Hug Your Boss Day. Although I will say, the reveal of the Thumbelina-sized gun in his Tommy Bahama pocket was an M. Night Shyamalan-worthy twist. Well done, tiny gun. You are both superfluous and surprising. But this story isn't so much about guns themselves as it is about one particular law that significantly expanded how they're used. I'm talking about stand your ground laws. 30 states currently have them, and while they were initially pitched as a law and order measure to protect people forced to make difficult decisions in impossible life or death situations, in practice, they can be invoked in incidents that really seem like they didn't need to turn deadly.
Absolutely.
The man who shot and killed a father of 4 at a Florissant bar is free tonight. So far, the gunman's not facing charges for the shooting at Show Me's Bar and Grill on Wednesday afternoon. The St. Louis County prosecutor says he needs more time to decide whether he'll prosecute the gunman. That's because Missouri's Stand Your Ground law is complicated. Scott Berry was killed when an argument over how heavy a dog could weigh became physical.
Holy
what
shit!
The fuck?
Not only is that a massive overreaction, it's a pointless argument. Everyone knows dogs come in a wide array of sizes, from pocket-sized sweeties to slender kings, to dense boys, to droopy boys, to big honking boys, to standard. That's just veterinary science.
I live in Missouri.
Stand your ground laws gained notoriety nearly a decade ago when police claimed that Florida's law kept them from initially arresting George Zimmerman after he shot and killed 17-year-old Trayvon Martin.
Claimed
More recently,
stand your
they've been
ground.
floated as a potential defense for the killers of Ahmaud Arbery. And those are just 2 devastating examples of many. And don't worry, we're not going to show you the far too plentiful footage of people getting shot in public places tonight. Frankly, we're just one senseless murder away from HBO Max putting this show in the endless parade of human misery category alongside Chernobyl and Entourage. But given the prevalence of stand your ground laws and the racial disparities in who they do and crucially don't protect,
yes,
it'd be worth taking a look at them. And let's start with why exactly stand your ground laws were created. Because before they came along, most states already had self-defense laws on the books that traditionally included an element known as a duty to retreat, meaning you couldn't resort to using deadly force in a confrontation if you could safely avoid or de-escalate it. Now, in many states, an exception
that makes
to
perfect
this rule was
sense
the
to me.
castle doctrine, a legal theory arguing that your home is your castle, and there you can use deadly force much more broadly to protect yourself against intruders.
That makes
The
sense to me
key
too.
thing stand your ground laws did was remove that duty to retreat from public places, basically extending the castle doctrine to anywhere you have a legal right to be. If you have a reasonable fear someone might hurt you, you have just as much right to shoot them in the street as you would if they were coming through the window of your house. And this change was largely thanks to the advocacy of one woman with a pretty compelling story.
Marion Hammer says she was walking to her car after a long day at the office when she was accosted by a car full of men. But she had a surprise for them.
I drew the gun up through the headlights of the car and I aimed at the driver. And somebody in the car screamed, "The bitch got a gun."
The bitch got a gun. I honestly did not expect to hear that come out of that woman's mouth. Help yourself to some hard candies in the ceramic pig? Absolutely. Take off your boots so you don't track anything on the wall-to-wall carpeting? Of course. But a curse word? In the daylight? Not in the 10,000
daylight?
contractions of the universe. But the important part of her story concerns what she claims a police chief said to her after she told her story publicly.
The police chief told me, well, in that situation, if you'd called the police, we'd have arrested you because you were the only one who employed the use of deadly force.
They had a vehicle.
And that made me angry.
And that argument is the absolute core of the case for Stand Your Ground laws, that Marion Hammer could have been arrested for simply defending herself. Now, she wasn't, of course. That didn't happen, but someone said that she might have been, and that made her angry.
One cop said that.
Marion Hammer seems like a sweet, everyday grandmother, right down to this feline glamour shot of her posted on a cat breeder's website. You should know she's also one of the country's most powerful gun lobbyists and a former president of the NRA. She has personally helped push through dozens of gun laws in Florida alone, including a 1987 bill allowing conceal and carry permits, a law then duplicated in some form in almost every state, leading to more than 16 million Americans currently having licenses to carry concealed handguns. So, that Margaritaville arsenal that you saw earlier, you have this Dana Carvey character to thank for that situation. And while it's not entirely relevant, you should know Hammer's advocacy wasn't limited just to guns. She also successfully killed a petition from 10,000 schoolchildren to change the Florida state bird to the scrub jay, a bird so hungry it apparently eats peanuts out of your hand. Now, she objected because, in her words, begging for food isn't sweet, it's lazy and it's a welfare mentality, and
oh my God,
that's robbery and murder. I don't think scrub jays can even sing. And okay, slow down there, Marion.
She's a crazy old lady. She's a crazy old cat lady. Why are we letting her weigh in on anything? What the fuck? Oh my God. Oh my God. Why does she have an official position of any kind? Holy shit.
Set aside lazy welfare mentality and robbery and murder, which is a lot to put on a
bird.
Scrub
oh
jays
my
can't
God.
sing. You might want to tell that to the scrub jay, Marion. See? That's fine. Is it great? No, it's not great. It's fine. It's
sounds like a bird.
Fine. Sure, the bird is no Mariah, but it's also no Roseanne. If that bird is anyone, it's Fergie. You heard me. The scrub jay is Fergie. Tweet it, talk it, put it in your pocket. I've made a flimsy take and I'm proud of it. The point is, Marion Hammer played a big part in passing one of the country's first stand your ground laws in Florida. And the passage of that bill was immensely useful to the NRA because it became a model for laws that they could then push around the country. Wayne LaPierre openly said at the time that Florida was the first step of a multi-state strategy and they were going to use the tailwind to move from state legislature to state legislature. And they did. Just 6 years later, stand your ground laws had passed in 22 states. And while following the killing of Trayvon Martin, they became increasingly controversial, states did not stop passing the laws. They just slightly slowed down. And Dennis Baxley, one of the state representatives who helped draft Florida's bill, was adamant that it should not be rolled back.
We should stand beside law-abiding citizens. They should not be treated as a criminal. They're doing something positive, which is stopping a violent act from occurring. There are going to be times with close calls near the foul line. Is it in or is it out? Who's the assailant and who's the victim?
You are talking about human lives.
Is it in or is it out? Is it right or is it wrong? Is it self-defense or is it a murder provoked by a debate about how much a dog can weigh that turned physical? Who can say? Not that guy. And that is a little bit of
exactly, not that guy. Not that guy, not regular people, which is why they shouldn't be making these decisions.
Determining questions of guilt incredibly difficult because it all comes down to perceived fear. Whether you legitimately saw someone as a threat. And that is definitionally subjective. What I am afraid of, snakes, clowns, and Tilda Swinton, Jesus Christ, might not be what you are. And it's made even harder by the fact that often the only other person who knows what happened in the incident is now dead. And citing stand your ground as a legal defense has been extremely successful. In Florida alone, as of 2012, nearly 70% of people who claimed it as a defense had gone free. And advocates for these laws will tell you that that's a good thing. That before their introduction, good people were getting sent to jail all of the time simply for defending themselves. But they never had much actual evidence for that beyond hypotheticals like Marion Hammer's story about how someone said she could have gone to jail, but crucially, she didn't. So stand your ground laws weren't really fixing a problem that needed solving, and the dangers they posed were pretty obvious to some from the start. When Georgia was debating a stand your ground law in 2006, a local station asked people in the streets what they thought, and watch as their third interviewee realizes something that the first two don't.
I think it's a lower crime myself, because a person's going to think twice about running up on a citizen if he thinks that citizen's armed.
If you feel your life's in danger, I think it's a good law.
I think it's going to get a lot of people hurt.
Why is that?
Well, because when you walked up to me in the parking lot, I didn't know who you were, and by this law, if I felt that you threatened me, I could have just shot you right now. You know, that's not right.
Yeah, that last guy is completely right. And in hindsight, maybe we shouldn't have listened to the man in the Pride of the South hat that, by the way, features a portrait of Robert E. Lee over a Confederate flag. That hat alone should have immediately disqualified anything he said. It's like if Anthony Fauci wore this bucket hat that says Daddy in the Shrek font. If he did, you'd be duty-bound to ignore anything
I don't know, dude. If Fauci came out in a Daddy Shrek hat, I'm pretty sure I'm in his camp even harder, dude. Are you kidding me? I'll get a bucket hat that says Daddy Shrek too. We can fucking start a crew. Me and Fauci. That was fucking sick. That hat was actually dope. Is that a real hat? That's a real hat. I'm gonna get it. I'm not even playing. I don't even wear hats, but I'll wear that hat. That hat was cool.
No, overall, not only do stand your ground laws not deter crime, they may actually increase violence. In stand your ground states, homicides overall have increased nearly 11% since the law's enactment.
Shocking.
Whereas in states without those laws, the homicide rate went down by just over 2%. In fact, another study found such laws translate into an additional 600 homicides per year. And if you're thinking, well, come on, you can't draw a straight line between these specific laws and people's actions.
Yes, you can,
In some
because of the cases.
You very much can.
Yeah.
Including one of the very first stand your ground cases in Texas.
Yeah, because there's a court trail.
He called 911
There's a
to
paper
report
trail.
a burglary happening during the day at his next door neighbor's house.
I've got a shotgun. Do you want me to stop him?
Nope, don't do that. Ain't no property worth shooting somebody over, okay?
Joe Horn sounds clearly upset.
I'm not going to let him get away with it. I can't take a chance on getting killed over this, okay?
No.
I'm going to shoot. I'm going to shoot.
But the 911 dispatcher warns Horn to stay inside at least a dozen separate times.
I've got officers coming out there. I don't want you to go outside that house.
Then Horn, sounding angrier by the moment, cites the new Texas law.
But I have a right to protect myself too, sir, and you understand that. And the laws have been changed in this country since September the 1st, and you know it and I know it.
Jesus, yeah. Fuck. Joe Horn knew what the law said, and despite the dispatcher warning him not to go outside 14 times, he did just that and killed 2 people, with autopsy reports later showing that both men appeared to have been shot in the back. He was explicitly told that property is not worth shooting people over, which is obviously true, and certainly not your neighbour's property. If I found out my neighbour shot and killed 2 people to save my PS5, I would move tomorrow.
Yeah.
They're hard to get your hands on, but Jesus Christ, calm down. I don't want your blood console. And thanks to Texas's new stand your ground laws, Joe Horn was never arrested, and ultimately a grand jury declined to ever charge him with a crime. And not only was Horn spared any consequences, he was later celebrated as a hero.
You had 911 on, and you said, I'm going to go stop him. You got to get here. I'm going to stop him. They said, no, don't go out. You stopped them. They came towards you. You shot them.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And
okay.
He shot 2 people. He murdered 2 people by shooting them in the back.
Grew up and sucked. The only time it's appropriate to cheer after someone says you shot them is if you're talking about the individual responsible for shooting this video of a family of bears in a swimming pool. Question, you saw the bears, you had your phone ready, and you shot them, right? Answer, yes, sir, that's correct. Cue the fucking applause, no other circumstances.
He fell.
And if these laws on their own weren't bad enough, there is now also a small cottage industry that's cropped up around them selling specialized self-defense legal assistance. Most of these companies offer membership packages including everything from educational training videos to money for future legal defense and bond. The US Concealed Carry Association insists it's primarily concerned with teaching conflict avoidance, but it also gives you a wallet-sized card with tips on how to handle the call you make to police after you've shot someone, a handy feature that their founder proudly touts to its members.
This is my very own USCCA card. You can see my name on it, Tim Schmidt. On the back of the card actually lists the exact instructions on what to say to a responding officer. Explain, I was attacked, feared for my life, and I had to defend myself.
Okay, setting aside the fact that looks like the most boring episode of Sports Center imaginable, it does feel important to point out that they've essentially created a get-out-of-jail-free card. And that, mixed with that man's get-out-of-jail-free complexion, is a pretty awful combination. And at least one of USCCA's clients apparently took the advice on that card and ran with it.
Carlos Garcia's ex-wife, Jailene Ayala, paints him as a loving father who would do anything for his children. She believes he was intoxicated when he showed up to pick up his kids and got into an argument with the next-door neighbor, Nick Julian IV, over him playing loud music in the car. Julian armed himself with a handgun and shot Garcia, he claims, in self-defense. Neighbors came out as Julian IV was on with 911.
911, what is your emergency?
Yes, ma'am. I just had a man attack me in my front yard. He attacked me, and I had to use force. I was afraid for my life.
Yeah. It seems all you have to do is memorize a few key phrases and you too could be free to shoot with impunity. It's basically Rosetta Stone for justified homicides. Because during his 911 call, Nick Julian made sure to say he feared for his life 3 separate times and can also be heard referring to his wallet and saying to someone, you just need to call them, give them the account number and my attorney. And by the time the police arrived, he was already on the phone with the US Concealed Carry Association setting up his legal defense before his victim had even been declared dead. And I know it might seem like these laws are just a free-for-all to shoot someone who scares you, but the truth is there are some limits, and you probably know where this is going.
That is
because while most
disgusting.
civilian shootings involve people of the same race, when cases involve shootings across racial lines, there are significant disparities in whose fear gets believed. Because the odds a white-on-black homicide was deemed justified by the police were 281% greater than the odds a white-on-white homicide was. And the expansion of stand your ground laws have appeared to worsen that disparity. A fact I'm pretty sure would surprise exactly 2 of these 3 men. Not only that, but there are multiple examples where you would think if ever a stand your ground law would apply, this would be the case, and yet it didn't. Take Sawatu Salama Ra, who waved an unloaded, registered gun at a woman she believed was trying to hit her and her young daughter with her car. But even though her state of Michigan has a stand your ground law, and even though that incident clearly falls under a reasonable definition of self-defense without it, and even though she didn't even shoot the gun because, again, it was unloaded, she was sentenced to 2 years on the charge of using a gun to commit a felony.
Oh my
After outcry,
fucking
she was
God,
able to plead to a lesser charge. That wasn't before she'd spent a year in prison, and she was pregnant at the time and was forced to give birth in shackles. So, despite stand your ground laws actually increase violence, and given around 4 centuries of history, basing a law around who's afraid of who was always going to be dangerous. It's the reason Ohio State legislator Stephanie Howes stood up to oppose her state passing its stand your ground law back in 2008.
Good for you.
When your presence, when your being, your blackness causes fear. Do you hear what I'm saying? I've been in these floors where I hear people tell me, you know people scared of you. It's people I have never interacted with. What do you do in places and spaces when your presence, literally your face causes someone to be fearful of you? This is a bad idea for people that look like me.
Exactly. That is just one of the things that makes these laws so dangerous. They can exalt a white person's fear over a black person's life, and are applied so unevenly.
Not can, dude. That's the whole point.
Shackles, while this guy gets a fucking parade. Stand your ground laws have contributed to a society where vigilantes with guns feel they have the right to decide what is safety, who is a threat, and what the punishment should be. They have turbocharged everything from road rage incidents to pointless disputes over dog weights. So what can we do? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. Don't pass any more stand your ground laws and repeal the ones that exist.
Please repeal them.
To a made-up problem, and they are actively doing harm. In the past year, at least 14 bills have been introduced in 5 states to roll their stand your ground laws back. And if you live in a stand your ground state, especially one where those bills have been introduced, you should absolutely write to your representatives to urge them to repeal them as soon as possible. And while you're at it, if you do live in Florida, or, you know what, fuck it, any state, in the interest of annoying Marion Hammer, why not also demand that they make your state bird the Florida scrub jay, so that it can maybe one day deliver its Fergalicious victory song?
Fergalicious.
That's a B+ bird. That bird is fine. That's our show. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week.
Holy shit.